materials in an email from Mia. So please feel free to take notes, engage with the text. And then, of course, as I shared earlier, please follow up with us if you have any questions throughout the duration of the webinar. So we have a lot of good things to cover with you this morning. Of course, you're going to meet Mia. I know that that they have communicated with you multiple times through emails throughout the tenure that's been here with the department so far, but today is an opportunity to meet Mia. We will also walk through some of the Senate Bill 1 guidance that the department has shared out. We've shared out in lots of written fashion, but we really haven't had a chance as a group to talk through some of the resources, utilizing those model policies, the principal selection guidebook, and so on. So we'll spend some time in that area this morning. We'll talk about the updated SBDM handbook, school identifications and SBDM implications, training verification, some reminders there, as well as a reminder with regard to alternative SBDMs. So without further ado, I would like to turn to my colleague Mia for introductions.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mia Morales. My pronouns are they, them, and I just want to give a quick background about myself. So my undergrad is in mathematics. I have a master's in education, and then I went to law school and got a JD. I thought that that wasn't enough education, so now I'm currently writing my dissertation in education sciences with a focus on educational evaluation and policy. Before I joined KDE, I was a high school math teacher, and when I started my JD and my PhD, I became a teaching assistant at UK, and then ultimately the assistant director to the Center for Equality and Social Justice, where we focused heavily on building relationships between the local school district and the University of Kentucky. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Mia. So we've really enjoyed our time with Mia so far, and it's been a great experience for all of us to have Mia in the SBDM role and appreciate the work that's been given and the attention given to the program. So we're going to move forward to Senate Bill 1. I'll just start with a quick overview and reminder of some of the things that have happened since the last time we were together as a group. And as we all know, Senate Bill 1 passed on April 13th. It did include an emergency clause section that was with regards to COVID leave. However, the remainder of the bill did not take effect until July 14th, and it embedded language regarding the Teaching American Principles Act, which requires the incorporation of those 24 fundamental American documents and speeches into the social study standards. However, for our purposes, it most notably impacted the transfer of curriculum decisions and principal selection from SBDM councils to superintendents. And we understand those to be hallmarks of Kentucky's educational ecosystem for quite some time. It's those implications that this office, the Office of Continuous Improvement, where the school-based decision-making program lives at KDE, that's what we focused our guidance documents on, and those are some of the things that we wanted to highlight this morning. So since the bill's passing in April, we tracked several questions regarding Senate Bill 1, and we compiled those into a guidance resource to assist districts, schools, other stakeholders who have a vested interest in the educational world as we know it in Kentucky. And ideally, those were designed to help districts and schools as they navigate through the changes and those updated requirements. We've shared that resource out multiple times. I know you're probably tired of seeing it. It's been in newsletters, it's been in the Commissioner's Monday Message, it lives on the KDE website, but we wanted to bring it to your attention again in a setting where we're all together in like roles, and because we have some new coordinators and trainers on the call with us this morning to let you know that that resource exists. And as time goes on, you may be just now getting to a position where you need to answer and provide support with some of those questions. So that resource is available to you. It was linked in the resource that Mia shared, and it can also be found on KDE's website as well. One of the responsibilities of Senate Bill 1 is that each school that implements school-based decision-making has the responsibility of updating its current consultation policy to assist with the selection of the principal by the superintendent. So every council needs to have an updated consultation policy that addresses that Senate Bill 1 requirement. Superintendents are required to follow the procedures that are outlined in a council's consultation policy, and the statute gives authority on establishing meetings, timelines, interviews, a review of written applications, and a review of references in that policy. So that's a lot to grapple with when a change happens so quickly like that. And so in effort to provide support and non-regulatory guidance and assist schools and districts, the KDE did amend its model consultation policy to accommodate Senate Bill 1. And so now we have two model consultation policies, one for consolidated local governments or Jefferson County, and then one for all other districts. And I do want to say, and I hope we've been clear about this in the past. It is not required for schools to adopt any of KDE's policies. Those are simply models to help guide councils as they work through amending their own. So perhaps there's something that works for their context within those model policies, but we encourage them to write a policy that works for them versus just blindly adopting KDE's model policy. In addition to that, staff also updated the principal selection guidebook. And the principal selection guidebook, it represents the best practices for principal selection in those schools that are implementing school-based decision-making anyway. So even though training is not statutorily required of all districts, it's only, or schools, it's only required of Jefferson County school councils. We encourage schools to utilize that principal selection guidebook. There's a lot of helpful and useful resources in there to help them work through this process and kind of better understand what their role is. And then that guidebook also includes, we've gotten a lot of questions for this, a non-disclosure agreement. And so that can be found in the appendices of that guidebook as well. So that's available. It aligns to Senate Bill 1. And then we also wanted to point out as a group that KDE updated its model curriculum policy. And so even though councils are no longer charged with selecting the school's curriculum as we understand it from years past, SBDM councils are required to still have a curriculum policy, but that policy must address the school's writing program. So we issued again that model policy to assist councils in that process of amending their curriculum policy. And we released that several months ago, along with these other resources. To help ease some of the confusion that schools may experience, because we've gotten this call, well, I thought we didn't make the curriculum decisions. Why are we writing a curriculum policy? We even named ours to say curriculum policy, but in parentheses, we added effective writing program so that it's very clear what that particular program or what that particular policy is in reference to. And also, we wanted to remind you, this has gone out in newsletters and it's also in that guidance document that I referenced earlier. Because the curriculum policy now addresses the school's writing program, it is not necessary for a school to have a separate curriculum policy and a separate writing policy. The curriculum policy is sufficient. They're not required to have both, but it's okay if they do, but the curriculum policy is sufficient. So basically, we wanted to just give an overview of that and just remind you and encourage you to ensure that your councils have updated their policies to align with those changes from Senate Bill 1. And then to also encourage you to take a peek at the principal selection guidebook if you haven't just yet, and to really use those to support your local needs and context. So I'm going to pause. That was a lot for one slide. I'm going to pause.
Natasha, there's a question in the chat.
Okay, let me click around here. Okay, this is from Shauna. Good morning, Shauna. How do you recommend we handle the superintendent consultation component as it relates to curriculum? So that's subject to local board policy. So we would defer back to that. So they're subject to following what's in local policy with regard to that. And if there's
Does
something more specific, let me know.
Natasha, does KSBA have a sample policy that addresses this?
The only ones that I've seen so far, Shauna, I haven't seen it go into great detail about this just yet. So I can't confidently answer that question because I don't know where they are with that process and what they've shared out. What I have seen was little hints and little glimmers of that, but that was a while back and I haven't seen anything since. Mia, have you been privy to any model policy from KSBA yet?
I have not.
And we can follow up with them, Shauna, to see where they are with that process, and we can share out from there.
Natasha, that would be wonderful.
We sure can.
I don't, we have so many schools and only one superintendent. And so I'm not quite sure what the logistics would look like here. So any guidance would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you for that question. We can absolutely check in with them. I see Sarah's question also, and Sarah, I may need you to clarify some for me. How does the curriculum change effective budget for SBDM? Talk me through that a little bit.
So some of our districts, I'm sorry, some of our councils were talking about where the money comes for curriculum if they're not making decisions on curriculum. Does the curriculum money still come out of the SBDM budget, or does it come out of the district budget? Or is it depend on the district? So one of that's the question that we're getting.
Sure. So the statute references the Section 6 monies. So there's a conversation there as well that they would have to use some of those appropriations to cover the cost of curriculum. But the statute also states that that decision is that of the principals as far as appropriations is concerned. Um, so after consultation or consulting with the council. So it kind of varies there. We may have to get on a phone call and talk through it a little bit more
Okay.
specifically in that circumstance that you're experiencing there, for me to better guide you. But just on the surface, those are the things that we know so far.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Mia and we will talk the SBDM handbook.
So the SBDM handbook has been updated to reflect the past legislative session. And if you are not familiar with the handbook, its purpose is to provide detailed information regarding SBDM processes, laws, and best practices. We do not intend for you to read this from cover to cover unless you really like nonfiction, but instead we prefer that you guys use this as a tool. So if you have a question on, say, staffing allocations, you can go to that chapter and you can get information right from the handbook. Each chapter has received updates to the appendices, and it includes the most up-to-date model policies, sample bylaws, consensus tools, and several checklists. So we recommend that you go ahead and download that just so you have a copy of it on hand. If you have any questions, you can always refer to it or reach out, whatever works best for you.
We do encourage you to share that link with council members in your districts. It is a great tool for them as well to have a resource, a reference, a place to go and to consult before perhaps they reach out to you or maybe even the chairs. A lot of good information in there, collected over the many years of SBDM implementation. So great tool and hope that you share it out. And as always, thank you for your patience. As when legislation changes, we're just going to, um, I don't know what kind of making list of all the things that need to be updated and aligned. And so we made our way through the handbook and got it posted for you. And as Mia shared, it does include all updated policies. So the policies for that align to Senate Bill 1, but also every policy in there was reviewed and given a careful eye and careful attention. So all of them have been updated. So we did want to turn our attention to SBDM implications for schools identified for comprehensive and targeted support. We all know, we've experienced it, we're living through it, that federal accountability resumed this fall with the identification of schools for CSI and TSI. We have been in a holding pattern for quite some time during the pandemic. However, we are back in full swing with identification. As a result, we do encourage those districts that are supporting CSI, TSI, and even ATSI schools to consult the SBDM implications for CSI and TSI schools document. It provides lots of additional information for consideration for identified schools and their councils. So we know, hopefully you know, that SBDM councils do continue to operate in schools that are identified for TSI. And that is also true for ATSI, or those additional targeted support and improvement. However, school council authority in newly identified schools that are CSI will be suspended and transferred to the superintendent following the release of audit findings. And that's bolded for you because that's a change from practices in years past. In previous iterations of the school improvement regulation, council authority was transferred upon the identification of the school as a CSI school. However, 160.346, it states that the authority is not transferred until the release of the audit report, or we call those diagnostic review reports here at the department. So I wanted to pause and let that sink in. If you are in a district that supports a newly identified, a school that has been identified for the first time this year, or perhaps the first time in a long time, if they had council authority in October when they were identified, that authority is not transferred from the council just yet. It's not transferred until they receive their diagnostic review report. Okay, so that's different. So there's still fully functioning councils in those schools right now. Okay, I'm going to pause, see if there are any questions about that.
Natasha, I put a question in the chat. It's specific to JCPS, so if you want to just follow up with me,
Sure.
and not take everyone else's time, I just wanted you to know that this is a question we have.
Okay, sure thing. I will say this only applies to the brand new schools that are added to the CSI roster this year, and we had 22 new schools added to the list. So again, it doesn't apply to previously identified CSI schools who are continuing identification for previous years. Their council authority has already been suspended, but this is for brand new schools that had council authority prior to being identified. But again, just that reminder that they still have fully functioning councils, and that is true until KDE delivers its report findings after the diagnostic review. Okay, so let's talk about former CSI schools and council reinstatement. So those schools that were CSI schools prior to October 18th, but then they exited. So if it's a school that was previously identified for CSI and it exited status on October 18th, so this past October 18th, those schools are eligible for reinstatement, but not until 2 years after exiting status, and if the local Board of Education agrees. So those schools that exited CSI status on October 18th, 2022, they are eligible for reinstatement of council authority after October 18th, 2024. So long time ago, I'm sure several of you remember this. they would basically, when we were under our old system, they would receive a letter from the department saying, hey, you're eligible for council reinstatement. But that is not the case now. It's a local Board of Education decision, and they are eligible 2 years after exiting status. And we do always like to remind that eligibility is at the discretion of the local Board of Education, because that local board may have adopted specific criteria that the department is not privy to, or perhaps even that the school is not privy to. So we definitely encourage any recently exiting CSI school to consult local policy to make sure all criteria have been met, and to determine whether your school's local Board of Education intends to reinstate SBDM authority. And then in the event that school-based decision-making authority is not restored, the superintendent maintains SBDM decision-making authorities, and the former CSI school must have an advisory leadership team or an ALT member in ALT team in place, and ALT members must be reported in the SBDM database on an annual basis. So if whether or not it's an SBDM or an ALT, those need to be reported in the school-based decision-making database, and that information again gets transferred. We shared this several times. It gets transferred into each school report card. So accuracy is key there. All right. If there are any questions, or if there are not any questions, I want to turn it over to Mia. All right, Mia.
All right, so council member verification. So pursuant to statute, the principal through the superintendent is required to forward KDE the names and training verification of all SBDM council members by November 1st. I'm very sure that you all are familiar that we are going through that. I'm sure everyone here has received an email from me at some point. So just continue to verify the accuracy and update the data as needed. I did want to make one comment about terminology. As far as council type, if there are advisory and alternatives and council types in the database. So the advisory refers to an ALT. So if it's a CSI school and you have an ALT, that would be listed as advisory. An alternative council type is if your school has submitted an alternative model application and it has been approved by KBE. So I just wanted to clarify that terminology really quick. Now, all this information is going to be entered into the KDE web application. If you need access to it, please contact your district's web apps admin points of contact. But otherwise, just continue to verify the accuracy and update it. Any questions on verification? Practicing my wait time. All right, so everyone's favorite season is coming up, and by that I mean the alternative model application season. So starting January 1st to February 28th, schools can add additional voting members, such as students or classified staff, to their council membership through an alternative SBDM application. If you are interested in adding a voting student, we do recommend that you go ahead and consult with your local board attorney before doing so. So during that time frame, January 1st to February 28th, you can submit an application for the alternative model. An application is not required if you wish to add non-voting members, or if you make changes that still maintain that parent, teacher, and administrative voting ratio as established in statute. When your application is approved by KBE, that alternative model will not take effect until the next the next council session. You can find the application and additional guidance at the bottom of the SBDM Technical Documents webpage, also by reaching out to me. Any questions on alternative model applications? So here's my contact information, my email, mia.morales@education.ky.gov, my phone number, and the verification link. So you can just acknowledge that you have present during this webinar. And I believe Natasha is going to be dropping it in the chat, and she just did so.
Yes, I just dropped that in the chat box. So select that link, please, if you have access to the chat box. If you don't, email Mia or myself, and we'll be certain to get that link to you. If you get there and you find any issues with the link, let us know, and we'll be happy to fix those as best we can with the tools that we have. Otherwise, after completing the verification link, you are good to go. I'm seeing here it says we need permission, so let me try to change some settings. Or Mia, which one of us created this, me or you?
I believe you did.
Okay,
Let's see.
I'll try it. Let's see here. And you guys don't have to hang around if you don't want to while I fix the permissions of this form. We can send it to you in an email, or you can just copy that one. So whatever works for you and your schedule, but I will try to make the update right now. And this is interesting because last night, right before I went to sleep, I thought, ooh, check the link to that form. And so I sent it to myself and did it, and it let me, but I guess that wasn't a foolproof method. So we'll try again here.
While Natasha is working through that, thank you all for attending. It was a pleasure to meet you all virtually, and I look forward to working with everyone.